share my screen. Can everyone see that there? Understanding educational data. If you can, then you might say that in the chat box.
Yeah, I understand.
I might just make it a little bit smaller because I've got some notes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So my name is Matthew Courtney, and I'm an assistant professor here at the Nazarbayev University Graduate School of Education. And our topic for today is understanding educational data. I did my master's degree in New Zealand. I started in my master's degree looking at some educational data to do with student motivation and whether or not that affected their achievement on TOEIC scores and TOEIC and TOEFL type scores. And that quite interested me. And it turns out that it was really important that the students that, or the foreign students that were more motivated and were more open-minded internationally actually did better in their English literacy. And then in my PhD, I did a whole lot of work with educational data. And after my PhD, I spent 5 years in research units in both New Zealand and Australia working with educational data. So I've almost been immersed in educational data, and I've built my skills a lot to understand educational data. So in this presentation, I'm going to present some ideas. Some of it might be a little bit, might appear too sophisticated or a little bit confusing sometimes. If you have any questions, then you can write them in the chat box. That's fine. So the topics of today, I'm going to first talk about what type of educational data exists. Then I'm going to talk about what type of questions we can ask with educational data. So someone is saying that in the chat box that there's no sound. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Yes? So maybe that's a technical issue with that person's computer. I'm just going to keep going. Okay. So first, what type of educational data exists? Second, what type of questions can we ask with educational data? Also, how can we use statistics that, to check that each question or survey item or test question is on topic? I mean, that's quite an important thing that we need to consider, that each question is actually part of the topic. If you're doing a numeracy test or a maths test, each question should be part of that topic. Is it possible to check that a test is valid and reliable? It is, and I can show you some ideas about that. Number 5, I'm going to ask the question, can some test questions be biased against gender or ethnic groups? And this is actually the case. Test questions can be biased against certain groups, and we can test for that as well. Advanced standardized assessment systems make use of these tools to check that each question is actually not biased against a particular group. If it turns out that a question is biased, then they can remove that question. Quickly, what is a statistical model? 7, how can we measure educational inequality in Kazakhstan? I can give several ideas for that. What drives educational achievement in Kazakhstan? What are the predictors of that? And are the drivers the same for different subjects? So is socioeconomic status as important for maths achievement as it is for reading achievement? Say, that's a research question. Number 10, understanding teacher leadership, school culture, and project implementation, this is what we're talking about a lot these days. Teacher leadership, whether a school has a collaborative culture and whether we can implement initiatives in our schools. We can all use, we can use data to come to an understanding of those processes. And at the moment, I'm doing some research on that I can share with you here. The last one will be on training, research, and job prospects. I'm not an expert, but I will mention some things that might be possible there. So first we can look at what type of educational data exists. Now, we can break up educational data into basically two main areas. One area is item response data. Item can mean question or survey question. It could be a question in a test or a question in a survey. Anything like that, that's an item. Now, there's special statistical frameworks we can use when we're talking about item response data. For example, students' responses to an individual question in a test, maybe a PISA test or a UNT test. We can think about data like that. Students' responses to individual survey questions, like well-being questions. That's also part of item response data. Also, a criterion referenced framework or assessment system. This is also item response data too. For example, when a teacher has a checklist of criterion, maybe for some problem-solving ability for a group or individual socio-emotional health, something like that. Another type of data is student achievement data. Now, usually, it's the total of the item response. For example, you might do a UNT test and you get a total score at the end, a percentage score. That would be at the student level, student achievement data. Sorry, I've just got some distraction in the background. Another type of student achievement data. So total scores is one type of student achievement data. And we also have specialized statistical scores that can put students and questions on the same scale. How about that? We can put students and questions on the same ruler. So if you have a ruler, I've just got some tape here. If you've got a ruler like this, you can put students somewhere and the questions somewhere. Maybe think about that for a while. Why might that be useful if we can put students and questions on the same scale? We have special statistical tools that we can do that. Student demographic data is another type of data. Obviously gender, age, ethnicity, things like that. And with this information, we can ask research questions. Which demographic variable is most connected to academic performance in Kazakhstan? We can ask research questions like that. Teacher and class level data. Now this is a different level of data, right? So we've got item level data at the lower level. Then we have student level data like total scores or special scores. And then we have maybe class level data, which has to do with what each student experiences in the class. That might be a highly trained maths teacher who has a master's degree and years of experience, or a newly trained maths teacher that has little experience. So these are teacher level or class level type data. Years experience, level of training, recent experience on leadership programs, etc. Class size. School data is another level on top of that. Is the school classified as an intellectual school, a public school, a private school? Is there a prevalence of Russian or Kazakh speakers? Is there a prevalence of males in the school? This is a type of school level data that we can think about. Regional data as well. Maybe this can be included. Regional GDP, regional educational budget. I think there are perhaps 12 to 15 regions in Kazakhstan. If some spend more on education, are they getting better outcomes? And country data as well. GDP, how much a country spends for their education budget. You can compare countries and also student outcomes as well, but that's a country level data. So we have all these levels of data, and we need to try and come to terms with all of them when we're doing research. But first and foremost, it's important to understand that those levels of data exist. Okay, hello to Mansour Ahmad from Kazakhstan. Good to see you here. I can see you in the chat box. So what type of questions can we ask with educational data? Now I've listed a whole lot of questions here. Whoa, who's drawing on my screen? Who did that? I don't know how that happened. I'll just continue. Adina, can you comment on that? Here are some educational questions that we can ask. First of all, some questions might be, how can we use statistics to verify that each question is on topic? Is it possible to check that a test is valid and reliable? And how do we check this? How do we check that tests are not biased towards some gender or ethnic groups? What are the most important drivers of teenage student well-being in Kazakhstan? We can ask these questions. Does student well-being vary much by school or region? How might policy and practice be informed by a study on student well-being? So there's actually very little that's been done in these areas in Kazakhstan. So there's a massive opportunity to research this area. Other questions might be, how can we track educational inequality year to year? What drives educational achievement in Kazakhstan? Is the gap between academic performance in intellectual and non-intellectual schools growing or shrinking year after year? Do we know this? Is the urban-rural gap in achievement growing or shrinking year to year? Also, do smaller class sizes make a difference in students' maths achievement in a school? What do you think? We can actually test to see if that's the case, and we can do that later together with some data I'm going to show you. When male students become more prevalent in school, when there's more numbers of them, does a school's reading performance tend to increase or decrease? What do you think a prevalence of males in a school might do to reading? Have a think about that. Also, when Russian speakers become more prevalent in Kazakhstan schools, does this improve or decrease the average reading performance of a school? Does improved teacher leadership, teacher engagement in leadership programs lead to improved teacher-led initiatives? Does a school's collaborative culture improve teachers' self-perception as leaders? So there's all these questions that we can ask, and we can begin to understand processes and systems and concepts and theories, or proposed theories and test theories within Kazakhstan. Let's continue. Let's start on this next question. How can we use statistics to check that each question is on topic in a test, right? In a test, we can check, we can order and arrange students. Now this is the results of a test here. We have the students who achieved every question correct at the top scoring students. This person got 10. And we have the low scoring students here. This person only got 1. These two people only got 1. So this data set here is arranged in a certain way. It's ordered by the total score of students. So student 1 got 10, student 19 got just 1 point. And it's ordered this way as well. So this is the toughest question. Only 2 students got that. This is the second toughest question here. Only 1, 2, 3, 4 students got that. So we would assume some type of uniformity in the data. And we can test for this uniformity. Can anyone in the chat box let me know which question might look a bit strange? Which question might look a bit strange, might be operating in a different way? Question 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. Can anyone identify a question that seems a bit strange? The data looks a bit strange for that question. Someone have a response.
The gender differences, for example.
Sorry, what's that?
The gender differences in the classroom, how the gender influence for the students' outcome. So this is something not related
to... Yep, there's nothing to do with gender because gender is not included in this table. All it is right or wrong. If a student gets a 1 in the test at the start on the easy questions, that's a 1, and 1 is blue. If you get it correct, so this is student 1, first question correct, second question correct. Student 1 gets all the questions correct throughout the test, but as the test gets more difficult, sometimes they get 0 for the question, they get incorrect. Sorry, perhaps I should have mentioned that a little bit earlier. I detailed that a little bit earlier. So question 10, why is question 10 different? Is it because there's more red? Question 6, why does someone think question 6 looks different, the pattern in question 6? Can someone explain?
Question 6, like the students, they're getting 0 and 1, they are on the equal level, can be.
Can you describe that again? Can someone describe for question 6?
Question 6 can be like the students, they're getting 1 and the students, they get 0. They're, sorry, they're on the same level because we can see the blue color and then also the red color at the same time. It's, like I say, it's occurring a lot. So we have the student, they got 0, and then we have the student, they got the top level, like 1.
Right. It's a little bit strange, right? Because these students, can everyone see my cursor? Can you see my arrow? Yeah, it's spinning?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, so these students at the top, these top students that score overall, there's many of them getting it wrong. That's strange. And these students that score low overall, there's a group of them who get it right.
Yeah, they are right, yes.
Yeah, so that calls to question that there might be something strange going on with this question. Why would the top students be getting it wrong? Why would the bottom students be getting it right unexpectedly?
Yes.
So we can use specialized statistical techniques to identify which questions might be operating in a strange way. Now, if you're developing a test or you're checking on the reliability of a test, you can use these specialized techniques to identify statistically the strangeness of each question. Now, very little work of this type is being done in Kazakhstan. I know because I've talked to many of the ministry administrators. So there are specialized techniques that can be applied to identify and carefully check on the function of each question, because we would expect each question to separate students in the same way. If there were several questions, several strange questions like this in a test.
So we have to check it out.
Yeah, then that would be bad. Yeah, we need to check it out.
Sometimes the questions, they are like reliable in different countries, but maybe in my context is something different because of the maybe religious or the I don't know, like context situation. So we have to change the questions according to the place where we live. So that's why this kind of questions is occurring. So we cannot say that this is the question is the reliable, is it?
Exactly. So can we be sure that the questions are reliable across total different contexts, for girls, for boys, for Russian speakers, for Kazakh speakers, for Kazakhs versus Russians, for Americans versus, so there's some careful work that needs to be done before we can actually make a claim that the test is reliable across different contexts exactly. And very little work like that is being done in Kazakhstan. So I'll jump to the next one, next slide. So correct, question 6 is the different one. Yep. Question 6 is strange because the low performing students are doing well on it, and the high performance students are not doing so well. So it's a different type of distribution, person response distribution. We can use some specialized statistics, just like a correlation. You can use a correlation between the total score and the score of each item. And these are the correlations between question 1 and the total score. These are the total scores here, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 there. And this is the question 1. This is the correlation between the question 1 and the total score. Question 2 and the total score. So we can identify, this one's especially low. So we identify that the correlation is low, so that gives us some evidence to check the question, to maybe ask the students, what's going on? When you looked at this question, why were you confused? How come these lowest performing students tended to get it? Maybe it has some, maybe it's not testing mathematics like it's supposed to. So these are some special statistical techniques we can use. Now, this here is an example of bias against gender or ethnic groups in test questions. Now we can use specialized techniques in addition to what I just showed you to check for bias against gender or ethnic groups for each question. Now, this is one question that I've seen in a physics exam in which boys tend to do better in if it's relating to sport. So if the question context relates to sport and it has to do with this physical theory, then the boys will tend to do better because they have more, tend to have more experience playing ball sports. This is an effect relating to balls moving through space here. So we can't include those questions. We should be removing such questions that are especially biased against certain groups. Because we don't want to bias against any groups when we're trying to separate them and identify competence for any construct, for any topic, for any subject. We need to identify which questions might be biased and not appropriate. Now, I'll just venture now into statistical models. What time we got? I'll venture now into statistical models. Now, this was the example before. This is called a Gutman chart. It just means an organized item response matrix. So it shows which questions students get correct and which questions students get incorrect, and it's ordered. It's ordered by question difficulty and student ability. So we'd expect some sort of triangle shape, right? So in order to identify, another way to identify that this question might not be operating in an expected way is to run what's called a statistical model. So instead of thinking of right and wrong, blue and red, we can think of shades of blue and shades of red. A statistical model essentially gives each student a shade of blue or a shade of red. So this top student here, instead of a 0 or 1 for this first question here, we're going to give him like a 0.99. And over here, we're going to give him a 0.7. Or you see what I'm saying? So everyone gets what's called a probabilistic value between 0 and 1. So we can use special statistical tools to assign those values. And this is the statistical model here. And if you were to join our program, we can carefully talk about what that is and how it works. But this is the model. This is the statistical formula for the model that assigns each person, for each question, a probability. So that now we have a probability for each question for each person, for each item. So every question a kid does in school, in a test, in UNT or in PISA, in any test, we can assign that person a probability value. Then we can check, okay, so these probability values should sweep from blues to red, blue to red, blue to red, and the same way here, blue to red. They should sweep blue to red. Now, we can also use that model to compare the model to the data. So we're comparing this model to the observed data, model to the observed data. And we can see where the differences are in colors. And the difference in color is on question 6. There's blues down here and there's reds up here. So we can add up those differences for each question. And that's a special statistical tool for another way to identify poor fitting questions. Those questions don't fit very well and we need to examine them. So if you're interested in building tests, building instruments, we can use these statistical tools. Now this statistical method, this formula, enables us, as I said before, to put people and questions on the same scale. Now you probably can't see that very well, but this represents a population of people, maybe for the UNT exam, for mathematics or whatever science. And this represents the questions themselves, each of the 80 odd questions or whatever for that test. So by putting the people here and the questions on the same scale, we can see how well the test and the questions match. Ideally, they should be a match and look similar. But this here suggests that for this test, it's a little bit too easy because overall people are above the items. These items are easy and the ability is a little bit high. If it's like a butterfly or a symmetrical, then we can say the test is optimal and functioning as well as possible to separate students. So this is another way to check on the targeting of a test, the function of each question in the test, and checking for bias and all those type of things, which is really important. So that's at the item level, that's at the test level, not at the total score level. So using this methodology, we can also identify total scores. And I think I mentioned those total scores here. Using the formula, we can identify a type of percentage correct special score often between -4 and 4. And the questions themselves are often between -4 and 4. And that's how we put questions and items on the same scale. And whenever people are developing tests, they use this methodology. Let's jump now to how can we measure educational inequality in Kazakhstan? Have there been some careful studies into educational inequality across groups? Gender groups, socioeconomic groups, we can compare differences. Here we have a mean, here we have two distributions, right? We have a lower performing black group and a higher performing blue group. And we can check on the differences between the means of those two distributions. So just imagine this is just a group of some people. Most of the people get an average score in the test, and then some other people get really high in the test. So this could be, this could represent two groups, maybe male and female in reading. Often males don't score as high, boys don't score as high as girls on reading. So we can look at the difference and we can measure that difference statistically. And if you join the program, we can learn about these tools and methods in statistics. What about overall inequality between schools in Kazakhstan? How do we measure that? Are some schools just doing incredibly well while others are lagging behind? Like, how important is the school that you go to in Kazakhstan? Do we want that? Do we want, what do the trends look like? Is it all about the school you go to? So different educational systems will have different degrees of educational differences between schools. And this is all based on standardized assessment, like UNT results or some PISA results, things like that. We can look at differences between schools. So this is one example from a TIMSS study, which is an international standardized test like PISA. And this is from maybe early 2000s. We could see that the mean for Australia was 517 for maths, and the standard deviation, the spread, is 100. So in Australia, there were 158 schools that took part in the test, and nearly 7,000 students. So we want to know how much did performance differ by school? So we can look at that. If you picture each of these being just one school, right? Each school has an average performance. Each school has a mean performance. The black school has a mean performance. The red school, the green school, the orange school, they all have mean performances. And each of those means represents another distribution. So the question is, how big does this distribution here become compared to the within school distribution? There's always lots of variation in student ability within schools. And sometimes this in a country becomes bigger, this smaller little curve here. So how big should this become? Should this become massive? Should we be aiming for massive differences between schools or just smaller differences between schools? So if we look here, this illustrates Australia. And in Australia, it's about 0.1 or 10% of the variation can be attributed to the between school effects. So this is about 10% and this is about 90% in Australia. We can look at other countries. This is another country here. This just represents it. It's like America. It bumps up a little bit further. Generally, there's 12% variation between schools. It can go up to 30, and 30 would be moderate. 30% of the total variation in student outcomes, student ability, can be attributed to school effects here. And that's an ICC of 0.30. That just means 30%. Now, in really unequal countries, it gets up 40%. And I've even seen up to 60% in places like Saudi. But that would start looking crazy, right? You've got all these distributional patterns, and some schools are just doing really, really poorly in terms of academic performance, and some schools are doing really, really well. We don't want societies like that, I suspect. We want to have some degree of similarity. Not uniformity, but similarity. These are some of the questions. I'm just going to zoom through some of the questions here. I think that's probably enough. I might jump to some quick results for Kazakhstan, because I did some studies on Kazakhstan with a master's student, and we were looking at the effects of what drove student achievement in Kazakhstan for PISA. And we found that there were some within school effects, like within each school, it depended on whether you were male or female. And then some also between school effects. So between school effects would be like socioeconomic status of the school. That was important. So when we apply these special statistical models, we identify what are the biggest drivers of educational achievement. And here we can see that the average for PISA reading was 453, but if you were a female, if you were a male, you lost 21 points, and if you're a female, you gained 21 points. Okay, so there's a little bit of a gap there between male and female reading performance. Socioeconomic status here just gave just a little boost to your grades. School, if you're an intellectual school, you're likely to gain 77 points. That's quite a lot. And if you if your school is of a higher socioeconomic status, you also gain a lot if you're classified in that school. Finally, if there's lots and lots of boys in your school, you also lose as well. So what does this mean for policy and practice? Well, ideally, the government should be pushing for more mixed schools. The more mixed a school is, the higher they perform overall. Class size is not so important, it seems. So the difference in there's probably not much difference in class size anyway, I suspect, in Kazakhstan, but it doesn't seem to make much difference. And there appears to be quite a large gender gap, especially when it comes to reading. So we need to be careful about that and maybe have some programs that might encourage boys to read more. That might be something. But we can do any sorts of analyses to make recommendations for policy and practice. Let's finally jump to a study on teacher leadership. We can use specialized models here to do with teacher leadership that I'm doing at the moment. For example, this model here suggests that if teachers find a teacher leadership program useful, they're likely to improve their teacher leadership identity, self-identity. If the teachers come from a school culture which is collaborative, that's going to improve their ability to implement an initiative in schools. So to sum up, so this is just from a questionnaire data that I worked with some Kazakh postdoc students, and we're able to build this model that helps us understand how the program works to improve teacher leadership identity. When teachers are more engaged in the project, in the program, they improve their identity. When the teachers are from collaborative schools, they have improved program outcomes. But there's no cross effect. There's no cross effect. Collaborative culture doesn't tend to affect school identity, so this is removed. This process here is removed from the collaborative culture. So our program can build teacher identity regardless of the effect of school culture. School culture can improve project initiatives and reform implementation regardless of our program. So these are we can build theory and models to make a statement about processes, educational processes. And I think that's about half an hour. Let me just finish with training and research and job prospects. So at our university, we provide step-by-step training in quantitative research methods, from the basics to the more advanced methods showcased today. Advanced training in quantitative methods will especially suit mathematics and computer science teachers looking to move to academia. If you want to do really well in this field, then you might want to have some interest in a little bit of computer programming or math or logic, something like that. There are many opportunities for research at the master's and PhD level, and we have many talented professors to guide students. Overall, little research has been undertaken in Kazakhstan in the areas of the item response theory and also multi-level modeling, which is what I showcased before. So this will only grow. And graduates may look may look for the National Testing Center in Kazakhstan to work, Center for International Testing in Kazakhstan, Ministry's Information and Analytics Center, the NUGSE, or the Nazarbayev University Graduate School of Education, will provide research assistant and postdoctoral positions as well if you're interested in academia. Yeah, so I think that may be it. In terms of positions in these government institutes, myself and my colleagues will be pushing for research units to be opened in those centers as much as we can, because there's lots of room to grow in Kazakhstan. The ministry should be, and we will strongly recommend that positions and research units be implemented or started in Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries as well. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. So please, if you have any questions, then you can unmute yourself and ask me, and I can do my best to answer them. You can make a comment on any of the slides if you like, and ask some questions, or just ask me some questions in general, that's fine too. Okay. I'm waiting. What was the total population of 2 groups? Which slide is that for? Is that for that one? Okay, that's just an example of just an illustration of what a result might look like. Cohen's D and t-test, very good. Yep, Cohen's D. Cohen's D would be associated with a t-test, yep. Paired or non-paired. Please, can you send the presentation to our mails? Adina, can you comment on that?
Yes. So are you sharing the presentation? Are you comfortable sharing the presentation with the participants, Matthew?
No problem. Yeah, I can share the presentation itself. Yeah.
Then we can email the presentation along with the record, today's session record in the Gmails. You all have registered in our website for the webinars, and I have all your emails. I will share them afterwards.
Okay, so here's some other questions. What's my field of research? So I'm interested in assessment and big data and automation, cloud computing, automated data analysis, things like that, and programming as well. I'm interested in the R programming language, R, like the letter R. That provides many, it's an open source programming language, and it provides many free opportunities and for automation and any sort of analysis you like. So my field of research is mainly assessment and understanding educational outcomes in countries, and also teaching programming and methodology. Next question from Adima. Thank you for your presentation. Have you investigated educational data from platforms like Moodle, Stepic? Okay, so this is becoming quite popular. There's some type log stream type data, some how people interface with Moodle and things like that. Like that type of data can be interesting to analyze, and people have used that item response theory, that modeling that I showed you, that modeling with the blue and the red, that type of thing. People have used that to analyze log stream data of people's typing, what they do, what they achieve. And that's quite interesting, sure. And I'm doing some other work on, similar work with colleagues from South Korea about that. Is there any special statistics course for PhD students? We have multiple advanced statistical methods courses for PhD students at our program. If you look on our course outline, we have multiple advanced quantitative methods courses. I will be taking one which is focused on assessment related data, while others will be taking other types of courses as well. So Ajiram, thank you for your PowerPoint. Welcome to Kazakhstan. Thanks, I just came here with my family maybe 10 weeks ago. What about Python language? Yeah, Python's a bit of a higher order language. I've done a little bit with Python, but at the moment, there's more packages and functionality for statistics and statistical graphics in R. But Python can be fun. You can do some machine learning if you want. Let's see. Jadek, thank you for your presentation. You're very welcome. Bachat, right? Bachat. That was a private message. I won't read that. Let's see, next question. How about adapting learning? Is it possible to build this kind of study using educational data mining? Adaptive learning. Maybe, Adema, you could describe that a little bit in more detail. It's important to recognize that we have educational outcomes and also drivers of education. And this type of modeling work can be done when you have an outcome of interest. If you're talking about adaptive learning, you mean when I'm doing a test and if I get something wrong, then I get some feedback about why that might be wrong? That might be, or are you talking about computer adaptive testing, which is different again, which means that the questions that you answer depend on your ability? I'm not sure. We have another question here. While designing a survey question, how can we ensure the reliability and validity of the questions? What strategies can be used? Good question. So, you need subject experts to help you design any questionnaire. Yeah, you need to, or test as well. You need subject experts to help you, to ensure that the content is aligned well. There's also lots of instruments out there in academia, in research papers. People will be using personality questionnaires, like the Big 5 personality questionnaires, extroversion, introversion, like all of those type of scales. They're already there. So you need to research the literature on the field first, because those instruments might have been validated in other contexts. So it's best to use those instruments instead of trying to create something yourself. For surveys, that is. So it's about working with subject matter experts to ensure that the questions are all represent a coherent suite of topics for that subject. Once you've done that, then you analyze the data and look for uniformity in the data patterns. Next question. My field of study is language learning. Is it possible to use statistical data for IELTS scores for Kazakhstan pupils? Will it be possible to correlate the methodology at schools? So, yeah, of course. If your outcome of interest is IELTS, then that's fine. As long as you have multiple numbers of IELTS scores for students in each classroom or school, then that's fine. So you could look at what are the drivers of IELTS performance in schools. You could have a survey to survey the students about their motivation and their attitudes. You could have a teacher level survey about what type of methods and approaches or pedagogical approaches that the teacher uses. So you could look at class level effects and within class effects as well on IELTS scores. That would be fine. Yeah, there's lots of things you could do. Any more questions? These are good questions. You can question verbally as well. You're welcome, Akat. How are we doing for time? 3:50. Adina.
Yes.
Are you there? What do you think? Should we move now to, oh, we've got some other, let me just finish that last question, Adina, and then you can move to the recruitment Q&A. Is that right?
Sure.
Okay. So just in the chat room, adaptive learning, as you said, when study is quite individualized learning. Okay, it can help to measure students' proficiency levels and provide feedback designed to help them achieve mastery. For example, if a student failed on the second task, the third task would be easier than the second. Understand where students don't get right. Okay. Adaptive learning. Okay. Is this perhaps use of differentiated learning? I think that might be one way to interpret what you're saying there. Yeah. Yeah, differentiation. So within a primary school class, you might have one group of teachers that try to differentiate and provide different material to students based on their ability, different material to different groups of students based on their ability. And then you might have another group of teachers that work with traditional methods. But there are multiple research questions that you can ask, but it's important to work to carefully construct a research design that works well with the methodology. So there's these statistical tools that need to be matched to the research question. Okay, from Gulnar. Thank you for your nice presentation. I want to study about latest educational policy for teachers' professional development and teachers' outcome. Good, from TELUS. So can I use the TELUS result for measuring the educational policy? Of course you can. I'm doing that right now with my colleagues. I can show you. There it is, all the TELUS data. Principal and teacher. And all merged. And I'm doing my own analysis on that myself with some colleagues focused on Kazakhstan. So there's lots of opportunities for research like that. All sorts of research questions that can be asked and all sorts of things that can be explored. Let's finish there. Adina, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Are you happy with that?
Okay. So, dear participants, if you have any question regarding admission requirements or any of the required documents to submit for the application of PhD or master program at the Graduate School of Education, you're welcome now ask your questions. You can actually use you can be unmuted, you have that choice now, or write down your questions in the chat box. Also, there is news about the language certificate and to attach as an application to your overall application to the program. So previously we asked your IELTS or TOEFL certificate. Now, because of the pandemic situation in the country, some of the English test centers do not sit any exams full April, and they have rescheduled their exams to the May, mid-May, or end of May. But the deadline to submit your language certificate at GC is 10th of June. That is why now we can accept your Duolingo test results. You can check out our website, nu.edu.kz. I will type it here as well, so you can see some additional information. Sorry, I didn't type K. Yeah, so university website you can check out. So now you can have three options. Apart from IELTS and TOEFL, you can submit also Duolingo test results to apply for Nazarbayev University programs. Deadline for documents. So all the documents, submission deadline for GC is May 12th. Exception is only your language certificate. It can be submitted until June 10th. Okay, so you're asking about details of this exam. Are you asking about the Duolingo test exams? Okay. Give me just a second.
Hi, Dana, can I help you with this question?
Sorry? Yeah, sure, please, Asel.
Concerning Duolingo English test, the whole information about this test is located on our website. Just follow our website. We made an announcement yesterday, and we made all the links to this test. So just follow the website and read this information, please.
Thank you, Asel. Let me also put some links here in our chat box, so you can see the exam schedules here, frequently asked questions from the official website, and how the preparation for the exam will go. Tamir is asking about the process of getting a reference letter. So you have two ways of submission a reference letter for the applicant. One way is if your referee has a corporate account, email account, then he or she will receive an email notification to their emails that they need to submit an recommendation letter in that link. Or if that person doesn't have any corporate email, then he or she can send in a hard copy to the admissions office address. Shura is asking about Duolingo test for whom. So Duolingo test results we can accept as an alternative for the IELTS or TOEFL, because nowadays we don't have any test centers holding that exams currently. That is why we can accept this as a language certificate. All the applicants applying to Nazarbayev University programs should have a language certificate, or he can be waived for certain circumstances, like if he or she is a graduate of Nazarbayev University or any other English medium speaking university, or he or she did a degree, academic degree like bachelor or master's degree in UK, US, Australia, any country where the official language of the country is English and the program was held also in English.
I'm sorry, can I comment?
Yes, please, should I go on?
English level master degree from Malaysian University.
I'm having some troubles hearing your voice, Shirai.
And I have a bachelor degree from Untitled University. I got the documents. Is it okay now?
Now, yeah, I've heard that you did a degree at Nottingham University, the bachelor degree, right?
No, Suleiman Demirel University.
Suleiman Demirel. Okay.
Which is now, yes. I got the certificate degree of English from SDU, but waiting for my master degree. So, can you accept like Malaysian University as an English country speaking, like UK or Australia, or do I have to present the document just like as you gave me?
Okay, Asel, can you please answer to this question?
Yes, if you want to submit English language test, you should present official statement from the university saying that the language of instruction in your case is English. Only in this case, there is possible that we do not require English language test from you.
Ashil, sorry, so I present from my bachelor program and master program as well, right?
So I'm not hearing you clearly, but so should you have the official letter from your university saying that the language of instruction in your program is English, we are going to accept it.
So it's yes, Matthew. If it was Malaysian University with an English instruction degree. So any other questions? We can take the last 2 or 3 questions and we are finishing our webinar for today.